Good morning, TIA. It's a treat to be here in Dallas because what's trite is true. It's always good to get out of Washington. And at the FCC, we're having some busy days right now. But I'm going to defy expectations and not talk about some of those issues that are before us, not talk about set-top boxes, or a slow-moving court that's reviewing network neutrality, or a fast-moving privacy proceeding. Instead, I want to talk a little bit about what you've titled this conference, the network of the future. And in particular, I want to talk about the wireless future, because it represents so much for the future of connectivity. And I want to talk about the next generation of wireless services, known as 5G, and what the United States can do to prepare for it. But before I get to the future, let me just roll back and talk to you a bit about the past. Because 30 years ago, this week, the first consumer mobile phone went on sale. It was clunky and brick-like, and it had one of those extractable antennas that reached up to the heavens, like old handheld radios. And all of it could have been yours for the handsome sum of $4,000. But within decades, time and technology moved on. After all, about 10 years later, we had a phone called the Motorola StarTAC. And maybe some of you had one here and remember it. It had a slim clamshell shape that closed with a really satisfying clack. And it was the device everyone wanted. It was new, it was modern, but of course it was built really for one thing, and that's voice telephony. 20 years later, our mobile devices are so much more popular and much more powerful than they were back then. In fact, they have capabilities that have changed modern life. And the United States leads the world in the current generation of wireless services known as 4G. In fact, while we only have about 5% of the globe's population, we have 1/3 of all 4G subscriptions. So far, so good. But if we want our wireless future to be bold, we need to do more than rest on those 4G laurels. We need to focus on what's next. And 5G services are poised to provide speeds more than 10 times faster than 4G service today. And those increased speeds are going to change the ways we communicate, multiplying the ways we use video. And I think over time, video and moving images will replace a whole lot of what we do today with text. The reduced latency of 5G services is going to multiply the opportunities for augmented and virtual reality. And the lower energy demands of 5G service will lay the groundwork for the Internet of Things. And so for all of these reasons, the race to 5G is on. The world's wireless economies are busy planning for 5G service. South Korea and Japan have plans to deploy in 2018 and 2020. Those are the years they'll be holding the Olympics. They're also working with the European Commission on 5G, and China's got its ministries working together to encourage deployment there. So even though 5G standardization is still underway and commercialization may not take place until the next decade, the race is on, and that's the kind of race we want the United States to win. So, let me offer you quickly 5 ideas for 5G. First, to find spectrum for next generation networks, we need to look up high, and let me explain why. Today, the bulk of our 4G wireless networks are built on spectrum frequencies from about 600 megahertz to 3 gigahertz. That's the current sweet spot for mobile communications. But the 5G future is going to look different, really different. We're going to have to bust through that old 3 gigahertz ceiling and create new possibilities in what's called millimeter wave spectrum, in the airwaves at 24 gigahertz and above. That spectrum that is way, way up there, and with apologies to Buzz Lightyear, I like to think of it as the spectrum that takes us to infinity and beyond. But with those stratospheric frequencies, there are propagation challenges. While those super high signals can carry an enormous amount of capacity, they don't go far. So we have to turn that limitation into a strength by combining these frequencies with small cells packed close together, densifying our new networks at lower cost. And it's not going to be simple to put these bands to use. We're dealing with novel technology. We're dealing with airwaves that have never been used like this before. But the FCC has already taken an important first step by starting a rulemaking on this issue last year. And what I'd like to see happen this summer is take 3 bands that we have identified for millimeter use, the 28 gigahertz band, the 37 gigahertz band, and the 39 gigahertz band, and put in place a framework so the United States can lead. Second idea. When we look high for new spectrum, we also have to remember to look low. This is not a complicated idea, nor is it especially new. But we have to remember that when we explore all those new high spectrum frontiers I just described, we also have to combine them with opportunities for spectrum below 3 gigahertz. That's the spectrum we use today, and it is critically important for wide-scale wireless coverage. And going forward into the 5G future, we need more low-band spectrum for commercial markets too. Idea number 3. We need not just licensed airwaves, but unlicensed airwaves. Good spectrum policy requires a mix of licensed and unlicensed uses. That's true today with 4G services, and it will continue to be true with 5G services. Already today, unlicensed spectrum supports Wi-Fi, which probably many of you here have used, and more broadly, it democratizes access to the internet. It's important. It's also important for our carriers. After all, more than half of their traffic today at some point is offloaded onto unlicensed spectrum. And unlicensed spectrum has a bottom line. It's responsible for more than $140 billion in economic activity every year in the United States. That's good stuff. We want it to grow. Now, right now, we've got a lot of unlicensed activity in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands, but they're getting crowded. So as we move on to 5G and exploring millimeter wave, I think we need an unlicensed action plan. In other words, we need a cut for unlicensed in our 5G policy. So call it the Wi-Fi or Y-gig dividend. But I think we have an opportunity right now in the 64 to 71 gigahertz band, which is right next door to an existing swath of unlicensed services. And I hope as we move ahead, we can seize this opportunity and create more unlicensed opportunity itself in 5G. Idea number 4, to build a bigger wireless future, we need to focus as much on the ground as on the skies. In wireless policy, spectrum gets all the glory. It's the glamorous stuff. But the unsung hero of the wireless revolution is infrastructure, because no amount of good spectrum policy will lead to better wireless service without good infrastructure. So if we want a big and bold future for our airwaves, we need policies that support those efforts on the ground. And that means modernizing tower siting practices from coast to coast. They are too different in too many places, and it adds a real cost to deployment. This is especially true for 5G services, which will multiply the need for micro towers or small cells. So finding a way to streamline their deployment right now is critical. All right, rounding the bend. Idea number 5, we need some sandboxes for our cities In other words, we need more experimental licenses. Let me describe this by pointing out that last year, the administration kicked off a big smart cities initiative. It features over $160 million in federal research support to help our cities tackle future challenges. And like a lot of federal programs, if you look closely, you'll get lost in some details. But stand back and squint. In these community collaborations, wireless technology is front and center because so much is dependent on sensors, data, and public policy coming together in a potent way. And I think the FCC needs to support these initiatives. And here's my idea for how we do that. 3 years ago, the agency adopted an order updating its experimental licensing program, putting in place new licenses for research labs, healthcare facilities, and more. These experimental licenses are really important. It's where the cool stuff happens. It's how we innovate, and it helps us create. They provide a safe place to play with power levels, explore frequencies, and develop new services. But for too long, one of the ideas in this decision has been stuck in the starting gate. 3 years ago, we proposed innovation zones, flexible, experimental licenses that are virtual sandboxes for cities. But the Commission has yet to set up an innovation zone or take in an application to do so. I think it's time to put this policy in place because it's tailor-made for smart city initiatives, and it's ideal for 5G services that can help demonstrate the dramatic opportunities of the next generation of wireless services. And let me finish by highlighting that last point. We have problems to solve, resources that are constrained, and communities that need help navigating what's possible in the digital age. There's no shortage of challenges ahead. But we're also on the cusp of cars that drive themselves, streets that can be safer, emergency services that are more effective, and healthcare that is more personalized. And we will have more capability in all these things because of connectivity. So let's talk about that. Because while 4G technology brought the smartphone to pockets and purses everywhere, the benefits of 5G technology are going to be bigger, bolder, and more diffuse. They'll be felt throughout the economy. But selling everyone on their benefits is not going to be easy if all we do is talk like I do about the 28 gigahertz band, beamforming, and small cells. I mean, I get excited about that, but that has its limits. So instead, maybe we should talk about it this way. What if we rewarded the city that cut commute times the most? It would take sensors and streetlights, roadside architecture, and cars, where traffic patterns could be made more efficient, and we could use it to make public transportation more effective. And 5G technology can help make that happen. And what if we introduced cameras in the helmets of every firefighter? They could relay video back to their colleagues outside, who could direct a team of firefighters in real time with low levels of latency, enhancing safety for both first responders and those whom they rescue. 5G technology can make that happen. And what if we monitored urban trees with sensors to help assess air quality and develop strategies for dealing with drought? In Los Angeles, they're already looking at this in a project, and I love this, named the Internet of Trees. And 5G technology can make that happen. To me, that's what the network of the future looks like. And I think we can get there and enjoy that future if in the United States we don't rest on our 4G laurels. Because the race to 5G is on, and the future belongs to the connected. Thank you.